Welcome to the Up in Your Family Business podcast, where we dive into the heart of family business with intimate interviews, expert insights, inspirational stories, valuable resources, and practical tips to help grow your family business. All right, I want to start by thanking our audience for tuning in today and or watching this episode of Up in Your Family Business podcast. Your time is limited, and there are lots of different ways you could be spending it and lots of other podcasts that you could be listening to. So I'm very humbled and grateful that you chose this one. The goal and purpose of this podcast, with the help of our guests, are to help family business leaders gain insights, solve problems, be inspired, seize opportunities, and achieve multi-generational prosperity. There's a lot of goals in here, so you have a big task ahead of you. So we have a very, very special guest today. With us today is Don Lamb, the director of the Indiana State Department of Agriculture. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very, very much for having me. Thanks for making the drive up here to be here today. I know we could have done this via video, but it's way better in person. So thank you for.
It's always better face to face.
It actually is. I'm old school, so
Me too.
I prefer face to face. So though the big trend now is people prefer video, and I don't know. I don't do as well with that. So okay. So what I like to do, Don, before we jump in, is I like to just give the audience a little background on you. Just do like a high level overview, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I don't have the time to read your entire bio. Too many achievements and accomplishments to mention. So I'll just give the bullet points here. Don was appointed to this role by Governor Holcomb on March 1st, 2023. Don hails from Boone County in central Indiana, where he raises corn, popcorn, soybeans, and wheat with his dad, brother, and nephews on their family farm. That's a real true family farm.
It is.
That's really cool. So born and raised in Boone County?
Yep.
Still live in Boone County?
Yep.
Awesome.
Right there.
All right. So your whole life, that's awesome. And Don was named the Outstanding Young Farmer of Boone County in 1996. So
That's a long time ago.
That really dates you. No, don't do the math, anybody. So is that something that's given to people like a certain age, like 12 to 18 or 18 and under?
I don't remember the criteria at that point. How that was, but
too long ago. I mean,
yeah.
In 2014, Don was named the Agricultural Professional of the Year by the Boone County Chamber of Commerce. Well, that one's pretty cool. You remember that one, right?
I do remember that.
Do you remember the criteria for that one?
No.
Okay. No. As director of the ISDA, he serves as a board member for Agra Novus and is a member of the State Fair Commission. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I like when I read that. I thought that was pretty neat.
Yep.
You probably have fun on that State Fair
Great
Commission.
things happen at the State Fair.
That's awesome. And how often? So you're on the State Fair Commission. How much time do you spend actually at the annual State Fair?
Oh, a State Fair, we're there all the time.
Are you?
The Department of Agriculture has a really big role at State Fair. So
absolutely.
Yeah, we have meetings throughout the State Fair, and we promote a lot of things. So
okay.
Yeah, I'm there every day.
So you're there. So it's State Fair
17
sleep,
days
State
straight.
Fair sleep, State Fair
That's
sleep.
right.
Okay. That's cool. Previously, Don served as the Boone County, I'm getting this theme about Boone County here. Previously, Don served as Boone County Council's vice president and was active as a member of the Purdue Dean of Agricultural's Advisory Council. Whew, that's a big, tell me, what is that exactly?
Well, Purdue, on the ag side, Purdue puts together people that are normally alumni, but just to give advice on things going on in the School of Agriculture. And,
okay.
It's really a great group of people, and they really bring us some questions and some ideas that have a lot of validity, and you get to talk about some important things.
How long have you been doing that?
Oh, I've done it 2 different stints now, but now I've been doing it in this role since I started in March of 23.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. That makes sense. He has been a board member of the Boone County Farm Bureau and served on the recycling, I like this part, on the Recycling and Market Development Board for the Indiana Department of Environmental Management. Phew.
Yep.
How do you remember all these titles? You gotta have a business card for each single one. So tell us a little bit more about that. What is that exactly?
Well, that was actually something that through the state where they give grants for recycling. And my interest in that, we have a recycling component to our farm. We have a 10-acre composting site, so do a lot of composting where we take in a lot of different materials that would generally be waste materials and turn them into something that's productive.
Yeah, I actually have a question for you later about that. That recycling. Recycling comes in many forms. Obviously, I'm limited myself to just making sure that I put my waste in a plastic container and take it to the recycling plant, and I'm pretty passionate about that. But I'm looking forward to hearing more about what that means in terms of farming. That's pretty cool. And then lastly, Don's main priorities are leading the ISDA's 5 divisions. Now, we're not necessarily going to get into these 5 divisions today. We're going to get kind of an overview, but I did want to mention them, which include agricultural advocacy. And before we started this, you mentioned that's a big part of your part of your role, the advocacy. Economic development, that makes sense. Youth development. So do you have ties to like the FFA?
The FFA is in our department.
That's what I thought.
The state FFA department works out of ISDA.
Do you guys spend almost all are you guys there full time at the convention as well?
Oh, yeah.
I figured you would be. Okay.
Yep.
I figured. Environmental stewardship, and that probably has a lot to do with that recycling and composting.
Well, and really the soil health, soil conservation, cutting down on erosion, things like that.
Okay. And the Indiana Grain Buyers and Warehouse Licensing Agency. What is that exactly?
That's a mouthful.
That is a mouthful.
Basically, think of it as FDIC insurance for grain. You know, if you put your money in a bank, there's some insurance that says if something goes wrong with this bank, here's a way to get your money back. And that's really a lot what that's like. Is if a grain elevator or a grain buyer would happen to have financial issues, then where a farmer would have grain liable in that situation, we can help restore that through a fund that the farmers actually pay into.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Well, that's really neat. So that's a lot. Do you sleep at the ISDA, or do you actually get to go home to your family?
Great people. So great people take care of those things, and so I just get to work with some really great people that do all those jobs.
Good. That's good. I mean, this is an abbreviated bio, so you obviously have lots of accomplishments and achievements, and this is really neat stuff what you do. If you want to read all of Don's full bio, you can just go to the ISDA website, which is in.gov/ISDA, and then you'll find them there on the About page. Yeah. So, and I'll share that again when we get to the end if they want more information about you. Okay, so what are we talking about today? You may have seen it there at the beginning. Rooted in leadership, a little play on words there. Don Lamb on advancing Indiana agriculture and family farming. We will discuss Don's leadership role in Indiana agriculture, his personal connection to family farming. I think it'd be good for us to talk about both of those. Current agricultural issues. There are always issues, right? And the blend of policy and hands-on experience that shapes his passion and his work. So that's another big mouthful. So we'll be covering a lot today. So before we jump into, I'm going to share some here in a few minutes, some statistics. I thought rather than having you have to have the burden of trying to remember all these statistics, Don, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through some interesting and perhaps unknown facts and statistics about Indiana agriculture that people might not know. Right. But before we jump in, let's put this into context. Agriculture is a big word. Obviously, you have a lot of responsibilities. Your department covers a lot of different things. I'm going to make an assumption. I don't know if a lot of people understand what agricultural really means. I think a lot of people think of farming only in terms of wheat, soy, corn, things like that, right? So we know that there's a lot more to it. So if you could, for our non-ag listeners, because there will be non-ag listeners on this, could you just share what agriculture really means on kind of high level overview?
Wow, yeah, that's a really big question. If you step back and say, what does agriculture really mean? It's huge. But I can, if I'm really trying to be concise, I would say food. And when you think about food, that maybe covers a lot of ground. It may be something that you get that's more of a produce product. It's a watermelon, or it could be something that is processed, something that is packaged, something that needs to have shelf life. And so there's all those different hands that go into getting that to the consumer. But then if you expand that out and you say, food is health. To have healthy food, there's lots of things that go into that. There's regulatory issues that need to take place to make sure food is safe. Lots of different things to get food from one aspect to a final aspect of how that goes in. And then, we really, in today's world, it's exciting because we would a lot of the times use the words food is health, and we think about plant and animal and human health, all how they're intertwined. And Indiana's in a great spot because of the ag technology that we've got, some of the companies that we have here in Indiana, the ag bioscience world. We really do connect food, all the way from the field to the plate. and then having healthy food is so important. So, agriculture is exciting. It's got a lot of different facets to it, but if I had to put it down to one word, I'd say food.
Okay. So what are some examples of some things before I looked even deeper into the Department of Agriculture, I first came across Indiana Grown. Mm-hmm. Okay. So Indiana Grown was a really cool starting point for me. That's when I learned, I'm like, and so maybe I'm the only person that doesn't know what agriculture really is, but when I looked at that and they talked about the farmers, the growers, and the producers, I was like, I never thought about that. I never thought that a tree farm was part of agriculture. I know that sounds really, but I was one of those people that I just, if I saw the farmer out there toiling the dirt, that's agriculture. We're good. And then I was also learning about the animal side that you were talking about. Yeah. So I thought that was really fascinating. So agriculture is so much bigger than I even imagined.
Right. Well, and that's where I think a lot of people think, it's hard to get into farming.
Mm-hmm.
And it is on a big scale, partly because the expense is so high, the equipment's expensive. People look around Indiana and they think, okay, you see the corn and the soybean farmers, which is what my farm has been based on, and you think, well, how much does it cost to buy an acre of land, and how much does it cost to buy that tractor to plant that crop? And it's hard to get into farming on that kind of scale quickly. And so, but there's so many opportunities and ways to get into agriculture. And a lot of people don't think about trees being a part of agriculture. We call them the patient farmers. And it doesn't matter if it's, and it may be a Christmas tree, and that would have a lot to do with agritourism. And the Dole's Christmas Tree Farm in Boone County is a great place to come and bring a family and get your Christmas tree. But that's agriculture because it takes 7 years to grow a Christmas tree, and they care for those trees for that amount of time and make
7 years?
7 years.
Jeez.
And then, but the hardwood industry in Indiana is huge. When you think about taking a piece of oak, all the way from growing it to producing it into a cabinet, Indiana is about a $10 billion industry in that hardwood industry, and those are the real patient farmers where they're taking quality hardwoods and they're turning them into something. And we export a lot of hardwood, and so we export a lot of veneer. Indiana hardwoods are sought after over the world, and people don't think of that either. So agriculture encompasses so many different things. You mentioned livestock, so many different ways to raise livestock, and a lot of people are concerned about where their food does come from. They want to know where that comes from. So you can create a market there with saying, well, this food came from right down the road from you, and this is how I raised it, and I fed this animal this amount of food, and this is how we do it, and people just like to have that connection to their food. So
that's neat.
Just tons of opportunities right now, and the Indiana Grown program, really it's just a branding program, and you know all about this. That's what your role is. You try to build a business, and Indiana Grown is something that a person can take and say, put that sticker on their product and say, okay, this product was either processed or produced or packaged in Indiana, and that should add some validity to it being a local product and somebody that you can ask, where did this come from and how did you do it?
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned how expensive is it to get into farming? Yeah, like you said, you got to buy the land. The equipment is incredible. I see those big pieces of equipment that are out there, those big green machines, sometimes red. Everything seems to be green and red. And I'm thinking, I wonder how much those are. So a couple of years ago, I was at Drago, Indiana, and I'm like, how much is that? $250,000. How much is that? $500,000. I'm like,
right.
Oh my gosh, it's incredible. Yep. So anyone can farm, but it's a lot of money to grow it and stay in it and everything like that.
Yeah. Well, and if you want me to go into it, I can tell you one thing. My dad is a first generation farmer, so that's a little bit unusual in Indiana. When you talk about a grain farm, most farms are multi-generation because it is hard to get started in it. So in the mid '60s, my dad started from scratch. And I still think, people would say, well, you could do that then, you can't do it now. I would argue and say, yes, you still can do that now. My dad started with Hart ways. He started very conservatively. He fixed everything with baling wire and duct tape and kept things going. And then today there's these creative ways that you can get involved in agriculture, like I was saying before. Create this niche of a market. Get involved, and then over time, you can start to build up to where if you want to be a grain farmer, if you want to have some acreage, it's not impossible to do that still. It's something that people still can do. It just takes some patience, and it's hard.
Yeah, that was fascinating to me when I was looking. how you were second generation. And that's what fascinated me about that is when you think of farming, you think of many generations. Like you have this assumption that everyone who's a farmer, they're probably fourth, fifth generation, because there are farmers in this state that go back to the 1800s, probably even the 1700s, right? I mean, it just goes way back. So I thought that was really cool. When I saw that, some people might look at that and go, well, it's only 2 generations. But what fascinated me about that is I thought to myself, his dad started this farm not too long ago. Like I never even really thought that, that people still started farms. I just automatically assumed they were passed down over generations.
No, it's the beauty of agriculture in another way. My dad grew up in Indianapolis, not far from the state fairgrounds.
Okay.
And went to Butler and studied business and went to the military. And so he was not really on a farm until he got out of the military in his mid 20s. And so I'm really proud of my dad because yes, that's unusual, but it doesn't mean it means it's possible.
Yes.
And yes, are things different today than they were in the 60s? Yes, the money is bigger, but I also think the opportunities are bigger. I really think there's more opportunities to be creative in the way that you would want to start a farm today than there were even back then. And so I'm always encouraging of young people, agriculture is such a awesome place to be. If you want to be a farmer, you can do it. But there's all these other aspects of agriculture too, whether it's technology, whether it's ag biosciences like we were talking about, whether it's agronomy, whether it's soil conservation, the environment. There's lots of ways that you can be involved in agriculture. And then that might lead to the fact that, I'm actually a farmer someday because I've put myself in this position and I've made connections and I did this and then this happened and then I had an opportunity to rent some land and do this. And the stories in agriculture are just fun. And for your business, when I think about what you do and when you're branding family businesses, agriculture is like the ultimate.
I know.
I really get excited when you introduced your podcast. I thought this is perfect because agriculture fits so well into what you're doing.
That's one of the main reasons I wanted to have. There were 2 things that really stood out when I learned. Again, I made that comment about multi-generation. So I made an assumption that obviously, but most farms probably were family-owned, run. But it wasn't until I saw the statistics that anywhere from 94 to 96% of them are family-owned and operated. And I was like, whoa, okay, I got to learn more about this. Then when I dove in a little deeper and I started really understanding, and when I say really understand, I mean, we're talking still a minuscule. When I started really understanding what agriculture is and the impact it has on the economy and how large it is across the state in terms of land and jobs and everything, I'm like, this is a big deal. Like, this is not just a department that exists within the state of Indiana. Like, there's a lot of important work being done.
Right.
And there's a lot about agriculture that people don't know and understand.
Right.
And so it was the family owned, and it was the importance of your department that, in agriculture in Indiana that really fast. And I'm like, I'd really like to have someone from there on as a guest because this would be a really great topic. Yeah. So you don't have to be in agriculture to appreciate what it is that your department does and what agriculture means to this state.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and that is very true. And that makes me think of 2 things. One is it really is multi-generational in most cases. It isn't unusual for it to be a 3 and 4 generation farm. We give away an award called the Hoosier Homestead Award every year, twice a year actually, to farms where their farm has been in the same family for over 100 years. And we have 100, and we have 150, and we have 200s. So every time we get a 200, every time we do one of these, we do one in March in the State House. We do one at the State Fair. There at State Fairgrounds, where families apply and they have to prove that through deeds and this and that this farm has been in our family for this amount of time.
How fascinating!
And last time at the State Fair, there were 6 families that had 200 years. And
6 at the same time.
Yes.
Wow.
And so. It's just so yes. While I'm saying I think it's exciting if you want to get involved in agriculture as a person, if you're a first generation, that's great. Go for it. But also the challenge that it is to keep a farm in a family for that many generations is also a whole nother subject. And when you talk about
that's a challenge for any business, right?
Oh yeah, for any business. And so it's impressive. And I get those are my favorite days of the year is to watch those families come up. And they might have 20 or 30 people that show up to get this award, or they might just be a husband and wife. but people are proud of the fact that it's been in their family that long, and they should be, because it's not easy to keep any business in your family for that many generations.
It is. It's I mean, you see the statistics in business, family business in general, it dwindles down. It's hard. How is with that said, how are Lamb Farms looking in terms of next generation? How are you guys looking? Looking good for third generation?
Yeah, we're good.
You're all good.
And, my brother's boys are both farming full time and getting more involved in management, and that's actually kind of an interesting thing about how I'm where I'm at. I got a phone call saying would I consider this job back in February of 23, and I was a full-time farmer. It's like, and so my first reaction was, well, no, I can't do that. I'm a farmer. That's what I do. And when I mentioned it to my brother, he said, well, that would force us to do some things we need to do anyway. And farmers aren't necessarily great at handing down responsibility. We're really good at bringing our kids on and helping them work on the farm. But we're not the best at handing over some of those management tasks, handing over some
delegation is hard.
And it's just not something that, and it probably doesn't come real natural to anybody, but farmers in general are probably more that way. And when he replied that way, I thought, oh wow, I really could do this. I could leave at least for a time and have this as part of what I do, and his boys can take on some of the jobs that I do, and we had employees already as far as people to drive tractors and do the labor. We had that, so it became kind of a light bulb moment. Wow, I could actually leave this farm and it would be fine without me. And
that's really cool.
And it has been. They've done a great job, and someday I hope to come back. So we'll see what that looks like someday. But when this part of the chapter's over for me, I'd like to be back on the farm. But it's worked out really great to be able to step away from it.
Is your dad still with us?
He is. He's 87 years old, and he's out on the farm every day.
Get out of here! Still?
He is.
My dad's 88, and he's in great health, but I can guarantee you he's not on a farm working right now.
And I will say he's doing he's not shoveling a lot of things.
Yeah, I understand.
But he loves to be out there, and he loves to be a part of it, and he's still just great advice to my brother and I, and now the next generation. I actually have 4 daughters, and one of them works part-time on the farm, marketing type work.
Oh, really?
And, again, when you think about agriculture, you wouldn't think about somebody who is doing marketing. Well, what product do you have to sell, and who's your customers, and who do you need to promote yourself to get to that next level? There's marketing opportunities in agriculture, which I doubt if people think about that too often.
I actually have a colleague. Her name's Krista Stillwell. She's part of Stillwell & Co. And she and I just had a conversation yesterday. We've been talking about, she lives in that world. She and her husband, Brian, both do farming and things like that. So she has not all of her clients are in agriculture, but that is where her passion and drive is. And it's over time, it's been becoming an interest of mine. So we're looking at ways that we can kind of merge our passions and our energy and our efforts and be more present in the agricultural world. So it's an opportunity that we're pretty excited about. I think it's a great place to be.
Yep.
So I appreciate you mentioning the marketing. I'm not sure exactly how we're going to go about doing that. We want to do it authentically, genuinely. We want to be a really good resource, and we still have to learn a little bit about how the agricultural world works.
Right. And
so I like that comment about marketing. So we'll figure that out for sure.
Authentically and genuinely is what you're going to get when you get into agriculture.
Exactly.
That's one thing I would think would be interesting in your role, because that's just what it is. The truth is the truth in agriculture, and you kind of cut through a lot of maybe the more standard marketing things. You say, this is what we do, and we're proud of it.
Yeah. The other thing, I had a thought, and it's nothing worse when you're on a podcast and you can't remember what your thought was. I literally had it 3 seconds ago, and then I forgot it. So I'll come back to it.
Well, let me. I told you earlier I had 2 things, and I got really off on the first one and didn't come to the second one. So I'll finish. I think when you were talking and you were talking about the Department of Agriculture and what we do. Our job is to promote agriculture. We're an advocacy group for agriculture, but I think people need to know that is unusual for a Department of Agriculture in a state. We're the 9th largest farming state in the country, and we're 38th largest in size. So the fact that we're the 9th largest ag state in the country is impressive. We're the 7th largest exporter of ag products in the country, and so I think Indiana has a lot to be proud of in their agriculture. but we're also a very small Department of Agriculture. And so when you look around the country, most departments of agriculture would have a lot more regulatory function than we would. We would think about food safety. We would think about the state chemist office. We would think about the Board of Animal Health. Those are all things that we have in Indiana. The Department of Health works on food safety. We partner with those other organizations to do those things.
Okay.
And it's a great way for it to be. Mitch Daniels set up the Department of Agriculture in 2005. We're a fairly young agency. 2005.
It didn't exist before 2005 in Indiana?
Now
wow.
there was an ag group as part of our Department of Commerce.
Right.
It was more like a committee on the Department of Commerce.
Wow.
But we did not have a Department of Agriculture officially until 2005.
Wow.
But when we set it up, we set it up differently than most states, and we are lean. We don't have we have 65 people, which is very, very small for a Department of Agriculture. Okay. Our budget is small for a Department of Agriculture. And yes, there's times I would like to have more resources, but our job is to be a partner and an advocate and a collaborator with all these other folks that are doing more of the regulatory work maybe. And it really works great. So I'm proud of the way Indiana is represented in the Department of Ag, and we interact a lot with other states. And I always come back a little jealous of the resources they have and the people they have, but I also come back every time thankful that we're set up the way we are in Indiana. Indiana gets a lot of things right, and in the Department of Ag, I think we've done it well.
That delicate balance that we face in life every day. How am I thankful and grateful for what I have, and how do I at the same time yearn for more?
Exactly.
How do you balance that?
And when you look at a farmer mentality, when I came into this role, one thing farmers always like to do is more.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what do you want to do next year? More, more of what I've been doing, and so that's an interesting balance to bring into the Department of Agriculture. We want to do more, but we've got limited resources to do it.
Do you want to use this podcast to lobby for more funds? We can talk about that.
Yes,
okay.
I'd be glad to do that.
Don Lamb wants more funding.
Exactly.
Okay. Maybe Mike Braun will give you more funding.
Exactly.
I remember what I was going to ask you about. I read a book many years ago, and it really fascinated me. Not only did I learn a lot of principles and approaches to life in terms of how to handle money and decision making, but there was this book called The Millionaire Next Door. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
And what was fascinating, it broke down what true wealth is and what true wealth looks like. In the book, hopefully I'm representing the book well. I haven't read it for a number of years. I should probably go back and read it again. But it talked about the people that have true wealth, they don't look like it. Mm-hmm. So people with true wealth, instead of buying a lot of stuff, they save. Mm-hmm. Instead of buying a whole bunch of new stuff, they use old stuff. And in this book, which just talked about how they view money, how they handle money, what money means to them. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What I do remember from the book, they said and they even broke it down in ethnicity. Mm-hmm. Like, it was crazy. They actually broke it down statistically into ethnicity. Mm-hmm. About certain, like, Scottish people were really good with their money. It was like really, and I'm Scottish, so I was kind of proud of that. But it talked about there were two groups of people that were really good stewards of their money, and they could stretch a dollar like no one else. Right. One of them were teachers, and the other were farmers.
Right.
And I was fascinated. It wasn't until I read that book, I never thought of a farmer as a business owner. Mm-hmm. Up until I read that book, I never really thought about all the money they need to manage, mm-hmm. all the decisions they need to make on a daily basis. So here we are talking about agriculture, but our audience mm-hmm. are business owners, mm-hmm. family businesses. So I would love to hear, this could be from your personal experience, mm-hmm. or this can be just in the world of ag in general. Do you agree with that?
Oh,
and
yeah.
Is that because by nature they have to be, or that's just the type of person that becomes a farmer? Like, what is it with farmers that make them such good stewards of their money and right. such good businessmen? We don't look at them that way because they don't wear a suit and a tie.
Right.
They're out there doing hard
right.
labor. But they're pretty smart,
right.
and they're pretty sharp. Share a little bit about that.
Well, for one thing, it'd be interesting to know how many farmers are married to teachers, because there's quite a bit of that. My wife is a teacher.
Get out of here.
My mom is a teacher.
Oh, wow.
And I do think
That's awesome.
In general, those two lifestyles work well together.
Mm-hmm.
We used to detassel seed corn, which is a big summer job,
mm-hmm.
and my wife, as a teacher, could help with that process because she was off on the summers, and there's lots of crops grow in the summertime. So that would be one interesting thing to think about, the teacher-farmer connection. But When your
we can start a dating site.
There you
and
go.
Bring them together.
Yeah, I think it's a good mix. It's been great. But the thing I would tell you, yes, farmers. Really, I think it's more of a nature of you have to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
Farmers have usually got a really good balance sheet, but they don't have any cash. And really to be able to cash in on that balance sheet, so to speak, you have to be willing to quit. At some point, because it's so capital intensive, agriculture is so capitally intensive that you pour most of your profit, even if you have a good year, into buying your inputs for the next year.
Right.
And it's really hard
to get. Cycle.
It's really hard to get away from that. It's really, as a second generation farmer, I can tell you we still carry a lot of debt. And we've been a conservative farm, but in that time, in the 50 plus years, maybe 60 years now that my dad's been farming, we haven't eliminated debt off our farm. And even when you think about it from you would expect to have debt on land, but even operating money from year to year, when you think about the cost it takes to put a crop out, we don't have the cash to do that. And so every year you get an operating loan and you pay that down. And I'm really proud of the fact that if we ever wanted to stop farming, we would be a family that would have some wealth for this generation. Mm-hmm. And then maybe for the next generation, you'd give somebody a start on something else. But the real key to longevity in a farm is being able to keep that wealth in the farm and keep it there. And that's what's it's the strength of a farm, that you've got this great base, you've got this structure, but it's also the weakness. If you ever want to stop, okay, you've got it for now. You've got some cash because you've just sold out. But the next generation has to manage that cash and has to, come up with something else to do. Where so many times it really just makes sense. Keep doing what you're doing. Get good at farming. Keep doing what you're doing. You may never feel like you're the wealthiest person in your lifestyle and the way that you can live because your money's going to go back into your business. But boy, you've got a structure there. You've got something that most people don't have, and so it's kind of an odd dichotomy that there is a lot of wealth in farming, but there's very little cash, and that's just the way it is.
It's funny you mentioned about the reinvesting, because when I see this equipment and how expensive it is, I think to myself, how much time does it take to get that money back when you put into that? And I look at the land, I look at all the equipment, and like you said, the people, the hands it takes to do all this stuff. And I think even if you have a good year, even if you have a couple of good years, it's not like you have this large amount of we had a good year. We got millions just sitting around. Yay, let's go celebrate. Right. I mean, you're constantly having to plan. That's probably what makes also farmers good businessmen is they might get some wealth or some profits, but they don't bask in that because what if next year isn't as good? Because you don't know, right? Yep. And what if some equipment breaks down? Yep. So they have to constantly be thinking about what comes next. Yep. So they can't just sit on it.
You've got to go with the cycles, and we've had some really good cycles in the last 10 years, really, and where there's been some money being able to pour back into the farms. And then you get a year like this one where farm income's down 25%, one year to the next. I mean, how many businesses deal with that? And things that are out of your control. Input costs usually go up very quickly with commodity prices. When we think about seed, fertilizer, chemistry, the things that you buy to put out a crop, it's kind of funny how if the commodity price goes up on the Board of Trade by $1, it's funny how those inputs seem to really follow pretty closely behind. And it's frustrating for a farmer. It's like, okay, now I know it didn't cost any more to produce these things this year than it did last year, but we still have to pay more to get them. But that's just the way the market works. The problem is then the commodity prices can drop pretty quickly as well. But those input costs don't drop like that. They'll come down slowly over time. Yeah. But in 1 year they don't. We'll slash 20% off of your input costs. So farmers deal a lot with kind of that ratcheting up. Commodity prices going up. That's good. We're bringing in more money, but the input costs go up with it. The cost of land goes up with it, and then all of a sudden you get this drop in commodity prices, and your input costs are still up here. So those are the tough years. This is a tough year. 24 is a tough year because of exactly that cycle we've been on. But it'll come around. Farming is a cyclical business. You got to be ready for it. My dad always said, the good farmers are the ones that manage well in the good years. When it's hard, when the times are tough like this, farmers just stop spending money. And that's the way you manage. But when you've got money, when you have a good year and you've got money, how do you manage it then? And so that's a good principle, I think, for everybody in every business to think about. When you have the good year, that's the time to really be thinking about management. When you have the bad year, yeah, you think, well, that's a tough year to manage, but in a lot of ways, you just stop spending and you just buckle down and get through it.
Wow.
So,
so maybe being a farmers being good business owners, they have to be. Otherwise, they won't survive.
Right.
So who's better with money, you or your wife?
My wife.
Okay, good answer. How about your dad and your mom too? Is that what you said?
Yeah, my dad, my mom, my
That's
dad.
crazy.
My dad has been a very good businessman. It's one of the best blessings I've had he studied business at Butler. He's always looked at farming more from a business side. And it's been an advantage to us not to have this generational thing where, well, Grandpa did it this way, my dad did it this way, I'm going to do it this way. Well, my dad had to figure it all out from the beginning. And so, the challenge is for my kids and my brother's kids to not get stuck in that mindset. Well, this is the way Grandpa did it. Well, there's going to be a better way. Things change, and you need to always look at your business from a fresh perspective.
So what is it about, I want to ask you a personal question. What, obviously your father started it, but again, we talked about the multi-generation. It's not a guarantee. Not every child is going to love to do what their parents did. What do you, on the ownership side, what is it about farming that you love? What do you love about farming? What's your favorite part?
Well, you get to produce something from almost nothing. When you think about, you just think about the multiplication, and if you want to go back to biblical terms and think about it in the way that things are multiplied. When you think about a kernel of corn is going to make 800 kernels of corn, on that year, and a soybean is going to make 60 to 70 more beans. That one. So the multiplication in farming is big, and that's something that we can't do that. It's kind of part of watching a miracle happen. Is we have to do our job. You do your job the best that you can, but you're really counting on a system that we can't control, and we can't even, the blessing of it is like a miracle to watch every year. So if you really ask me what gets me excited about agriculture and farming, it's the fact that we get to be a part of really a miracle of multiplication, and you get to see that, and then you talk about, you used the word steward earlier. We're really stewards of this resource that's incredible. It's like you've been given this gift, and we all have been to some extent. You've been given a gift, and you're to steward that resource. But in farming, you get to see it year after year. Like, wow! Even in a bad year, you think, well, we still multiplied a lot. Now, we may not be able to be profitable, but making something from almost nothing is really a great thing in agriculture.
Do you enjoy the business side of it?
Oh, I love it.
Do you really?
I do.
Okay.
Yep.
So you'd like the whole thing?
I love the whole thing.
Okay, that's really neat. Because I wonder how many farmers love the work, but not necessarily the business side isn't always fun, and that's where the stress comes in. I would think a lot.
Well,
too.
and I think that's part of management is that just if you enjoy something or don't enjoy something, maybe you do it, but maybe you hire somebody else to do it. And that's really where management comes in. There's parts of our operation that we don't have to have a specialist in this area. We're gonna contract that out, and you do that in your business. Every business does that. So the important thing is there's really good agricultural accountants out there, and if you don't enjoy the money management side of it, then I'm going to rely on somebody else to help me do that.
Okay,
and that's okay. That's good.
That's good. Okay. You mentioned some of the statistics, and I love this. I as a podcast host, I have a plan in place of how this is going to. But I love when the conversation just takes a life of its own. So hopefully it's not a weird spot, but I still want to go back to those statistics because I want our audience to really understand what agriculture is in Indiana and how important it is and the impact it has. So what we're going to do is I'm going to share those statistics real quickly, and then we're going to jump back into some questions. Good. Okay?
Yep.
And tell me if any of these are wrong, or feel free to expound on any of these. So this was fascinating to me. Agriculture contributes an estimated $35 billion to Indiana's economy. You might have mentioned that. That's a lot. That's a lot. Almost 83% of Indiana's land is devoted to farms and forests. I did not know that. I was shocked by that number. If you had asked me, I would have been like 33, 35. So 83% of our land, which is really fascinating. When you think about all the homes and the buildings and everything, it's pretty fascinating. And you said Indiana is the 9th largest farm state. Indiana is the top producer in the nation for popcorn, gourds, and ducks. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, ducks?
Right.
I'm like, that can't be. But supposedly it is. And that was cool, too, about the popcorn, because honestly, I was thinking, maybe Iowa or Nebraska has... It's the branding, right? You have the branding, so I just assumed that, So I was pretty proud. I'm like, Indiana's got this. Iowa, Nebraska, you have nothing on us. We're also the 3rd largest producer. This really was interesting. The 3rd largest producer of eggs, tomatoes, and turkeys. Is that true?
True.
It's true?
Very
Okay.
true.
Okay. Indiana is the 4th largest producer of soybeans and the 5th largest producer of corn. Let's see. Indiana ranks top 5 in other areas, other crops, including, spearmint, peppermint, watermelon, one of my favorites, and pumpkins. Like, geez. The Indiana hardwoods, you mentioned the hardwoods.
Right.
The Indiana hardwoods industry has an annual economic impact of over $10 billion.
Correct.
Go back to that again. Tell me a little bit more about the hardwoods again.
Well, when you think about hardwoods, really you're going to harvest hardwoods. And when you think about, when people think about forestry and, you think about, we don't want to be clear cutting our forests and things like that. The hardwood industry are the truly the best conservationists that we have of trees. They plant 3 trees for every one they harvest, and
which I thought is amazing.
When you talk about coming into, if we have some woodland and we're about ready to do this again, where we'll bring a forester in and say, okay, let's do some timber stand improvement. There's some trees that are mature, they're ready to be gone, and let's get rid of those, and they can look at that forest and say, if we take this one out, this tree and this tree are going to benefit, and they're going to be better, healthier for the future. When you think about things, even like birds like a variety of tree ages. They like young trees, old trees, everything in between. When you think about, honestly, if you let a forest just go, they all get to be old, really. And it's not as healthy of a forest as if you actually manage that forest. So there's a lot to do with managing forests when it comes into hardwood. And then that specific, the qualities of the hardwood that we have here in the state, it's because of our relationship north to south and how things grow. But we have especially good white oak in Indiana. Well, who'd have thought? But people around the world like white oak that comes from Indiana. It's a little different because of just our geography. And I'm not smart enough to tell you why that is, but it's true. And so anyway, the hardwood industry is something, people don't think of much in the state, but it's big.
Where does the majority come from? What part of the state?
North and south.
Just
both.
North and south.
Yeah, I mean, there's some all over, but yes, definitely the south we think of as that rolly area with more forest. The national forest is down there in the south, but there's quite a bit up in the northern part of the state as well.
Okay. Yeah, I was fascinated, and the reason I want to share these statistics again, it's not just the economic impact. I think it's part of our brand.
Right.
And and there may be people in the ag business don't even know this.
Right.
I as a proud Hoosier, and I wasn't born here, but I've been living here for 17 years. And as I was going through these statistics, I was like, go Indiana. Like I didn't know I didn't know all this stuff.
Yeah.
So as a Hoosier, it just kind of made me like proud and inspired, and I was just fascinated with it. So
no, there's a lot to be proud of, and you mentioned things like duck. Yes, Maple Leaf Duck and Kohler Duck are both 2 companies up in northern Indiana that raise a lot, and that's something we don't think about too much. We don't. We don't go to restaurants. It's usually not the first thing on the menu for us here in Central Indiana, maybe. But when you go around the world and you look, duck is a very, very popular thing to have on your menu, and so we export an awful lot of duck as far as that goes. I'm a popcorn producer, so when you say we're number 1 in popcorn, I'm proud of that. We raise popcorn for Weaver Popcorn, which is
Do you really?
Van Buren.
Oh.
But there's several popcorn companies in Indiana, and popcorn is something we're proud of. And you mentioned Nebraska being somebody you might think, well, they're number 2, and we have this good little competition.
I like it
because there's been a few years they've been number 1, but we've edged them out in the last couple of years, and so those are the fun things too. Like I say, we have relationships with other state departments of agriculture, and you better believe when we get together, we're doing a little comparison about how we've done in the past year and what we've done. So
that's neat.
Popcorn's something we can be proud of, but so many things. Red Gold tomatoes. You think about we were number 3 in tomatoes. I think is one of the statistics you read. the Red Gold Tomato is a family-owned business up here, and it's huge in our state. And when you talked about watermelon, Knox County, Indiana, down really in the southwestern part of Indiana, Knox, Gibson, that area down there, sandy soil along the Wabash River, good irrigation. You need water for watermelon. It's not a coincidence that watermelon would need water. And pumpkins are down in that area as well. And cantaloupe, and those are big areas, and those farmers down there they're very different than a central Indiana farm. The growing something like produce takes a lot more attention to detail, a lot more input cost, a lot more labor that goes into harvesting watermelon than harvesting corn. Food safety, you've got to stay on it. When you're selling something direct from your farm to the consumer's plate, you have to make sure that you do that in a safe manner, really from the farm right on out. So, there's just a lot to it. But yeah, we have so much to be proud of. The spearmint world. You talked about spearmint. That's in northern Indiana. And to be real honest with you, it's impressive because we're high in spearmint. That comes from about 8 or 9 farms total in the state of Indiana. There's some guys that are very specialized in raising that and processing that on their farms, and it goes out. When you think about toothpaste, and whether it's Colgate or Crest, both of those have got quite a bit of mint that comes from Indiana in those products.
It's interesting. I have to ask you: do you actually eat your own stuff? Like, do you like popcorn?
I love it. We've got our own brand. My dad's name is Bob, so we've got Old Bob's Pops. And we have our own little
Old
brand.
Bob's
Old Bob's Pops.
Man,
so,
I like it.
And I have it just about every night.
Where do you sell that?
We mostly give it away, to be honest with you. It's when I say our own brand, it's a small. We can, if you raise 3 or 4 acres of popcorn, that's more than you can.
Okay.
But we raise 1,000 acres of popcorn for Weaver.
Okay.
So really, when I say we raise popcorn, you really raise for a company that has the opportunity to export and do the marketing like Weaver, which goes into Kirkland's brand at Costco and things
that's
like
interesting.
that. But it's fun. I just would hate to raise popcorn and not have a little bit of our own, that we can
makes
put aside.
sense.
So it's more of a hobby.
That's cool. Okay. It's interesting. You mentioned, well, first of all, I just want to say popcorn. I know a lot of people love their microwave popcorn. It's convenient, but I have someone in the family who makes popcorn the right way. She puts a little oil at the bottom, gets a kettle, puts the kernels right in there, puts a lid on it, and it just comes out naturally. Put a little salt.
Yep.
Oh my
Perfect.
gosh. Beats any bag of popcorn. Any bag of popcorn. Okay, let's get through some more here. You mentioned about the hardwood industry. It produces 70,000 jobs.
Yep.
It's huge.
Yep.
It's a lot of jobs.
Right.
And of course, it creates a bunch of secondary opportunities as well. So it looks like it's the hardwood industry is well over 100,000 jobs, direct and indirect.
Yep.
It's pretty neat.
Well, and I'll take the time to say, in Indiana, we've done a very, very, very good job of economic development, and that's been a focus of the Holcomb administration. And they've really done a good job of creating a business-friendly environment that's brought a lot of things here. And that's been good. Sometimes agriculture can feel like, maybe we're opposed to some of this economic development from a standpoint of, well, if you're developing these things, that's taking up farmland, and that's doing this. So in some ways,
sense.
you can feel like it's competition. And in some ways, it is competition.
Yeah.
When we talk about the land use, we have lost quite a bit of land in the last 10 to 12 years in our state, and that's an issue. You got to keep your eye on that ball because you don't want to lose too much for food production.
Yeah,
like that.
Does your department kind of keep an eye on that and manage that?
Yes, well, we definitely keep an eye on it and watch it. And then there's a whole list of really complicated issues of how you would try to control that because we're also very big on property rights. If I own a piece of land, I ought to be able to do
what I want with it.
So the idea of coming in and saying you can't sell your land for development is not going to happen in Indiana. But at the same time, there's this big picture. How do we encourage the right kind of growth? And so I want to come back real quick and just say, I've been really happy with the way that IEDC has developed this business-friendly environment in our state. But I'm also looking for, one thing that we are looking forward to with the Braun administration. He's made it pretty clear so far. I want to help rural Indiana. I want small towns and communities, agriculture to be built up.
Right.
And he said in his acceptance speech, the other night, there's 4 corners of the state, and I want to make sure that we're taking care of all 4 corners of the state. And I don't say that to say that the last administration has ignored that. In fact, they've poured a lot more money into rural Indiana than most people would know, and give them credit for. But to have that focus on rural Indiana, we're really about a $23 billion increase of our GDP comes from agriculture, which is more than the auto industry in Indiana, which we don't maybe think of ourselves as big auto producers, but we've got 5 of the major auto plants in our state. Where auto is big, and if you said we're going to get rid of the auto industry in the state, well, that'd be a huge thing. Well, agriculture is bigger than that in the state. So again, you just don't realize the economic impact that agriculture has. And so I'm proud of that. And then I really look for ways in the future that I want to do more. I want to take that farmer mentality of let's do more. Let's really promote that. And,
how regulated is the farming industry?
it's very regulated, very regulated. And sometimes you think, well, that's bad to have lots of regulatory stuff. It's really, we need regulatory impact. We need to be able to follow rules to make sure things are safe. We need to take care of our environment. We need to take care of things. So it's not bad to have regulatory things out there. The key is to have good relationships with people. So if you're in agriculture, we're going to be good environmentalists. We're going to produce safe food. Well, here's some partners that you have, whether it's the Department of Health or the Department of Environmental Management. Here's some partners. They're not against us as regulators necessarily. They shouldn't be looked at that way. It's they can help us. Well, hey, we might want to think about doing this different so that we make sure this is safe. And so it is highly regulated. And really in the bigger picture when it comes to pesticides and things like that, very highly regulated. But it should be. It should. Those are we don't want to mess with that. We want to be safe, and we want to produce food that is safe, and we want to take care of our environment.
What do you think about? And this might not be a direct correlate. I'm trying to think how his role will impact the farming industry. It's probably more about the people that sell in the markets. But what do you think about Robert F. Kennedy's initiative with the whole health?
Yeah.
I'm assuming that probably goes all the way back to how we produce our food, right?
Right.
So what are your thoughts on his vision, and how do you think that's going to negatively or positively impact you or the agricultural world?
There's a reality that farming is, he uses the word regenerative agriculture quite a bit, which is really what we've been doing all along. People talk about sustainable agriculture, and nobody really knew how to define that, so we've kind of used this regenerative word quite a bit, and a lot of that would mean doing things with no tillage or minimal tillage, and using cover crops and doing things like that. These are all things that we're doing anyway.
Okay.
So in a way, I say, yeah, bring it on because these are the way this is the way we're doing it. The thing I would caution on is things need to be science-based. And it can't just be a feeling. It can't be something where, hey, we're going to require farmers to do this because it has to be better. Well, no, prove to us that it's better. Prove there's a real health consequence to this if you do it this way or do it that way. Prove that we're actually harming the environment by doing this way versus doing it this way. I mean, things need to be science-based. Farmers are going to be very proactive at doing things right because that's what we do. I mean, it's our livelihood. It's what we, when you think about my farm, I live right there on my farm. I want that soil to be healthy.
Yeah.
When you think about One Health, that means we have, I believe healthy food starts with healthy soil.
Right.
And farmers believe that.
Okay.
And so I don't think that it's a new concept, and it doesn't hurt to have some focus put on it.
Right.
But I also can tell you that agriculture has been around long enough that we don't need to come in and say, well, from now on, we need to really change the way we're doing things because of this. I mean, if you can prove to us that that's right by science, okay, we'll consider making some changes.
Probably very similar to the electric cars. I mean, there are people within political parties that, hey, we're going to get rid of, gas vehicles, and we're going to do, by this year, we're going to be all electric. And I'm like, wow, you're asking me to make a big change, and I'm not necessarily sure that this is the right way or that it makes sense. Right. Does science really prove that this is this something that is proven to be the right way, or is this just this is what I want. So it's probably probably very similar.
Well, and margins in agriculture are always small, like we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And so, and believe me.
So changes could be costly,
so
right?
Changes can be very costly.
Yeah.
If there was really some new regulatory structure that came in because of that, of that feeling, most likely it's going to really be hard on the profit side. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't have healthy food and profits at the same time. We can have both because we have been doing both. And so so I really think I don't mind a bit having some focus on whether you want to call it regenerative or sustainable farming practices, because that's what we're doing. That's what we do. Let's talk about what we do. We're already there, I would say. And then scientifically, if there's changes that need to be made, let's base it on science. Let's base it on the truth. Let's not base it on a feeling or a thought.
How closely, again, farming is very large. You talked about how you have 65 people on your staff, and I don't know what all they do, but how hands-on, no pun intended, with the farm, but how well do you know all the farm? Like how close is the ISDA with the farming industry? I mean, I know you have events you have throughout the year and you guys advocate and things, but do you personally, over the last year and a half you've been doing this, have you met a lot of farmers? Have you spoken with them? Do you meet with them? Do you get feedback from them?
Yeah, I get out quite a bit, but I would say the one thing that is our strength in Indiana too is our commodity groups and our farm bureaus and things like that.
Right.
The other groups that are, Farm Bureau is an excellent example. There's a Farm Bureau office in every county. So 92.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So
every county.
In every county.
Okay.
So there's 92 local Farm Bureau boards and to talk about things, which is a great system. It's just a great grassroots system. So if I want to get word out across the state, I'm probably going to go to Farm Bureau and say, hey, can you make sure that your county presidents know this? And they'll get it out. The other thing, Purdue Extension, what a great tool. Again, we have extension agents out in most counties, and that system has been stretched over the last really 20 years with a budget that's been stagnant, trying to keep providing services like we did 20 years ago. So it's a tough spot to be. But in general, the Purdue Extension Service is another great way to get out into the ag world across the state. So we do it. I do it personally. As far as, for one thing, I like to. I mean, there's nothing that makes me there's never a better day for me than to be able to go out and visit a farm. So I like to do that. But really, the other ag groups are what really takes care of a lot of the communication across the state.
Okay, so there are a lot of groups.
Yep.
Supporting the farming industry.
Yep.
That's really great. Let's talk about the future of farming. I was very fortunate. Like I said, I've been living here since 2007, so I'm very familiar with the FFA convention. I heard about it. We were very fortunate. We have a client, Cowpokes, work in Western. They're here in Anderson. They have a location in Cloverdale, and last year we volunteered just for 5 hours or so at the FFA convention, just supporting them because
Yep.
Those retail hours are crazy down at the FFA convention. I mean, there were 10,000 fewer people. Supposedly there were 10,000 roughly fewer people there because of the hurricanes. Okay. And it was still jam-packed. You saw it, right?
Yep.
But so we volunteered last year. We volunteered again. I tell you, I'm really glad that we participated. I mean, we're there to support our client, but the energy, I felt very proud to be there. And I will tell you, I think the FFA convention is so important. Right. I'm not even in that world. Right. And you could there's an energy there. There's an excitement. I tell you, I really like the FFA convention because it gives me an opportunity to kind of experience and interact with, because I'm actually helping out. I'm talking. My job is I have kind of a hosting bent. So Cowpokes has like 8 cash registers, and I'm at the front line, and I'm directing everybody. Yep. But I talk to everybody when they come up to the line. I enjoy that, and I'm just so impressed. Now some people would argue that when they're not being watched, they're having a little too much fun, but they're kids, right? But man, there's this. The kids are just so mature, and they seem. I'm trying to think. They're different. There's something about these young kids, and being at the convention and just seeing the energy and seeing the passion and talking to these individuals, I feel like the future of farming in this country is in good hands. I feel like the future looks really good.
No, I totally agree with you. For public relations in agriculture, there's no better week than FFA National Convention Week downtown, because everybody looks forward to it. The business owners look forward to it. Obviously, they're going to make some money because they're going to sell some food and they're going to do some things. But we never have negative comments. We never have, well, they're out of control or they're misbehaving. We always have the positive. Man, those kids are polite. Man, those kids, they know what they're doing. They know how to behave. Yes, just the fact that they're learning about agriculture, learning about opportunities in agriculture is a great thing. But selfishly, I'm going to tell you, as an agriculture person, they're the best PR thing we have going, in downtown Indianapolis for that week. So we love them being there. They're really good advocates for agriculture. Then when you think about what they get to do and what they get to work in, as I've been saying all along here this morning, there's just so many opportunities. I mean, they're from working for the big companies and good companies like here in Indiana with Corteva and Elanco. Those are, those are really big, scientific companies. If you want to be in that bent, you can do it. We've got people that are making robotic sprayers using GPS, using solar power to run them, all sorts of new technology that's coming in. If you want to be in that technology side, there's all those opportunities. And then we have people that are raising local food and they're selling their own brand of beef and they're marketing to a restaurant and they're doing that. And there's just, it's almost limitless the areas that you could get involved in. And FFA does a really good job doing it. And I'd put 4-H in the same category. So the 4-H program is really good, and then the FFA program is really good, and they partner together very well. It's not like a competition like you got to be in 4-H or FFA. Many of the kids are in both, it's just the way it works.
Interesting.
So great opportunities for the youth in Indiana to be involved in ag. I think it's interesting. I went to Lebanon, and when I was at Lebanon in the 80s, there was no ag program, because it, historically had been this farming group. And so, Lebanon wasn't really that much of a farming community anymore.
Right.
So somewhere along the line, the FFA had been eliminated from the curriculum. Well, then since then it came back. So after I left, when you think, well, we're getting farther away from farming, aren't we? We're getting fewer farmers and bigger farmers and all that. Well, but the opportunities in agriculture have been growing so much that and there's lots of schools in Indianapolis, Beech Grove and Arlington and lots of
agriculture is being added to the curriculum.
FFA back in the curriculum because there are so many. Why not?
And that used to be the case many years ago, right?
Correct.
It was more. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, it's really exciting what the opportunities are for the young people. And I'm like you. Yeah, we're in good hands. We've got some really smart, sharp young people that love agriculture, and they're going to be great for us.
The future looks good in Indiana.
It does.
Okay.
Really good.
What time limit do you have? What time do you have to head out today?
I don't know.
5 minutes? Oh man, I thought I had you till 11. All right. So here's what we're going to do then. So where can they go to learn more? Like these, I didn't read all the statistics. Where can they go to get more of these statistics? Right to your website?
Our website. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. ISDA.com.
Okay. All right. I love it. This our conversation is just. I love it. I never really asked you a formal question that was on my list. I think it just kind of took a life of its own. I think we covered a lot. This is wonderful. Okay, we can't. I'm going to do the dad joke segment, so you're going to have to suffer through that.
Okay. Good.
Okay. So for our audience, as you know, we do a dad joke every segment, and then when we launch the podcast episode, you can go to our Facebook page and see the answer. Of course, it's agricultural based. What type of? Don't answer it if you know it.
Gotcha.
What type of publication do cows enjoy reading the most? What type of publication do cows enjoy reading the most? So think about it. I'll see if, when we're off the air.
I'll answer it.
No, but when we're off the air, I'll see if you know it. I had some bonus dad jokes to ask you, but we won't have time to get to those, but they're good ones. I'll just run through these. My favorite one. What is the top role at McDonald's farm? See if you can answer that one.
McDonald's farm. EIA. EIA, something to do with that.
Yep.
EIA.
What is the top? You're on it. What is the top role at McDonald's farm? The CIEIO. Okay, and then I'll just mention another one. I love this one. What kind of horses only get out at night?
Dark horses.
Nightmares. Oh, come on, it's really good. And then I'll get one more. How do you get a farm girl to like you? How do you get a farm girl to like you?
I have no idea on that.
Tractor. Oh, come on. These are awesome. I have more, but all right. As we wrap up, I do want to ask you one of my questions that I had written down.
Okay.
What advice would you give to family farmers or just family businesses in general? Because again, farming is a business to sustain their legacy for future generations. So just think of any farming or businesses in general.
Communicate.
What about communication?
And
Is
then
that important?
communicate.
Okay.
Yes, communicate some more. But honestly, that is the most important thing is the relationships. It's always about people. You can make any business work, I think, if you have the right people and the right relationships and the right communication. And in a family, that sometimes is harder than if you weren't family.
Absolutely.
You got all the, and so as a family business, and that's the way most farms are, it's too easy to ignore, let's say, the elephant in the room. Well, bring that elephant out into the room and talk about it and say, where are we going from here? What do we want to do? What's your goals? And how can we do this together? So, communicate.
Yeah, we have our daughter that started working for us a year ago, and it's not always easy. I mean, how do you separate that parent-daughter with worker? Man, it's not always easy.
Yep.
It's not, and then she's young too, so there's a maturity gap as well. Right. Though I'm not sure I'm much more mature than she is. Right. But all right. So if you want to learn more about the Indiana State Department of Agriculture, you can go to in.gov/ISDA. You guys are also on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We didn't go much into it, but I did mention earlier about the Indiana Grown. I think Indiana Grown is a great. It's like it's one of your marketing arms, right?
Right.
For your organization.
It's our number one marketing arm.
I love it, and I think Caroline Patrick is doing a phenomenal job.
She's awesome.
She's so accessible, so helpful.
Yep.
She's always willing to talk to anyone who will add value or has an interest in what she's doing or what you're doing. I just love it. Indiana Grown's on Facebook and Instagram as well. If you want to learn more about Don, if you want to see his full bio, I give an abbreviated. Just go to the in.gov ISDA website and just go to the About page. I think you're on there, and some team members are on there. You also have a LinkedIn profile. So Don Lamb, LAMB. Go there. And I think that's it.
All right.
I had some more questions, but the director of communications, Reagan Herr, has given us the 2-minute warning. So we're almost done. I just want to thank you so much for coming on here. Like I said, as I learn more about agriculture and just seeing how important it is and the impact it has and what it means to this state and what it means to the future of the state, it's just wonderful. And I know I knew you were coming either from your home in Boone County or from your office in Indianapolis, and it's a real honor and a privilege to have you on here. I was really, really excited, and it's interesting. Just so you guys know, Don and I never met before today, and this conversation just seems so natural. I think the passion and the energy you have just makes this conversation, regardless of how well you know the person over here. Just the excitement you have for what you do and the passion for what you do, it just makes the conversation so easy.
Well, and I appreciate being on because agriculture is a small group of people. And so we need to get the word out. And there's so many good things. It's easy for me to talk about it because ag's an awesome place to be.
Yeah. Well, we're going to wrap up. I just want to thank the audience for being here. Don, I really appreciate you tuning in for this one. If you want to check out some other earlier episodes, you're welcome to do that. We're on iHeart Podcast, Apple Podcast, and of course Spotify. Or you can go to our website, element212.com. That's element212.com. In the meantime, may you, your family, your teams, your customers, and your communities be blessed. Have a great day.